What's up, Reapers? Today we got something a little bit different. Alright? So, I asked for permission to use a video. Okay? Without further ado, let me go to their thing. Hold on. Alright, here we go. Thank you. Shout out to SSG Animation. Go check them out. Link will be in the description below. Today we are going to... I did somewhat watch it. Forgive me. Today we are going to watch 17 True Horror Stories, an animated compilation, July 22, by SSG Animation. Again, if you don't know them, they're really good at their animations. Phenomenal. Like, you guys are really good at what you do. No, I'm definitely not just a little jealous of your subscribers. Just again, we're gonna do a try not to get scared challenge, and I'm hoping that I can do it this time. Again, I've only watched halfway through. I haven't watched the full video, and I don't even remember any of the video, to be perfectly honest with you. I was sleep deprived, I still am. Without further ado, oh, forgive me, let me, there you go. There you go. Alrighty then, guys.
We decided to get a few hours sleep before heading.
Why did it start way back over there?
I can't take it anymore, Mr. Nibbles. It's always, yo, Death Knight, buff my armor. Hey, Death Knight, get your...
It happened on the 12th of October, 2007. Or at least, I think it did. My life since that day has been nothing but a messed up, bizarre story. No one believes me, as everyone I tell thinks I'm just crazy. But I know I'm not. I know what happened that day, and regardless of whether you believe me or not, this is my story. My name is James Smith, and for as long as I can remember, I've never really had a home. Now, some people may see this as a bad thing, but to me it was perfect, as I truly felt like a free spirit every day I woke up. I moved around a lot while doing a few menial jobs here and there on the side to make ends meet. I didn't have much family, apart from my uncle who I used to travel with. He passed away a while ago, leaving me with his most prized possession, a little pink mirror. I don't know why, but he loved that thing to death, and I've always held on to it to remember him by. Apart from that, I really didn't own much. I just had a couple of clothes, the necessities, and my backpack. During my time on the road, I traversed the whole country, doing jobs during the day and staying at any available place at night. Most times, I'd stay at low-end hotels and motels, as they were cheap. Looking back on it now, I'm pretty sure that I stayed at over 1,000 motels while I was on the road. But there's one particular motel that I'd never forget. It had the strangest name. It was called the Tempus Mortis Motel. The day was the 12th of October, 2007, and I had just finished doing a hard day's work. I think I was pretty much on the outskirts of town, so I found it harder to find a place to stay that night. I looked around for a couple of hours, and right when I was about to give up, I saw it. It was literally in the middle of nowhere, which to me was odd for a motel. I thought it was really odd because most of the motels I had seen were built beside bus stops or in active towns. That way, they always had an influx of customers who were always looking for a bed to sleep in. So seeing this one built right in the middle of nowhere made me think twice about going in. I don't know why, but something about it felt off and my instincts told me to steer clear. So I decided to look around a little more, but after walking and searching for a couple of hours, I found nothing. It was getting pretty dark now, and I knew I only had two choices. Either I slept on the ground outside in the cold, or I stayed at the strange motel I had avoided a while back. After a quick consideration, I decided to opt for the motel, as even though it gave off a strange vibe, it was still better than sleeping outside. So I made my way back to the motel. I still felt off about it while I walked back, so I told myself that I'd leave if anything strange happened. It was about 8:30 by the time I had arrived, and I remembered walking up to the building and seeing the parking lot completely empty, as there were no cars outside. I wasn't surprised, as I figured not many people would be staying here. As I got closer, I noticed the motel had a bright neon sign that read, "We offer the best timeless service." Perplexed, I wondered what that meant, as every other motel usually had the normal 24-hour service sign. As I walked on, I eventually brushed off the thought, as I assumed that it was just their slogan or something. I finally reached the building, and as I opened the doors to walk in, something changed. For starters, the air felt calm and serene. It was like all my troubles had gone as soon as I stepped into the building. I walked up to the reception, and the woman there greeted me with a huge smile as she looked at me and said, "Welcome to the Tempest Mortis Hotel, lost traveler. May I ask your name?" She was oddly cheerful, so I looked at her and said, "I'm James Smith, and I'd like a room for the night." She then opened up a book to write down my name before she said, "Okay, Mr. James, may I take..." Shocked, I responded with, "What? But I haven't paid yet." She then said, "Not to worry, Mr. James. We always provide our services first. You can pay when you leave." As she started getting the room keys from her desk, I started thinking to myself, because in all my years of traveling, no motel had ever offered a bed without pay.
That's true. Most of them, if not all of them, will require you to pay prior to actually staying. Because otherwise, as far as they know, you'll ditch in the night. Which is just messed up, by the way. That's straight up messed up. Don't ever ditch in the night. Don't ever, no. Pay for the room if they let you stay there. Unless you're in this guy's situation.
And while she did say I'd pay when I leave, something about that didn't seem true. Standing there in that reception, I realized that my gut instincts were right. Something was seriously wrong with this place. I thought about what to do next when the receptionist said something that pulled me from my thoughts. "No watches or mirrors." Confused, I said, "What?" The receptionist then repeated herself, saying, "I'm about to take you to your room, so I'm asking you if you have any watches or mirrors. They aren't allowed here." Stunned, I asked, "But that's a bit strange. May I ask why?" She then said,
That's weird. Why wouldn't a place allow watches or mirrors, so reflective surfaces? What about water?
"It's just our motel's policy." Numerous thoughts began to run through my head as I wondered why they didn't allow those items. Normally, motels didn't care what you brought in, and when they did, it was only dangerous things like firearms or weapons. At this point, a lot of things weren't adding up. First, they offered a bed to me without paying, which was already screaming numerous alarms at me, as there was no such thing as a free bed. Then she blurted out this strange rule. I didn't know what was going on, but I knew I had to leave, as I had decided that I'd rather spend the night outside. But as I opened my mouth to tell her that I didn't want the room anymore, I heard the sound of thunder, and I realized that it was now drizzling outside. The sudden rain made me take back my words, because as much as I wanted to leave, I couldn't afford to sleep in the rain and get sick. So I responded with, "No, I don't have any watches or mirrors, just my clothes and the necessities." After hearing that, she smiled and said, "That's great, Mr. James. Now, if you'll kindly follow me to your room." As she showed me to my room, I heaved a sigh of relief that they didn't search me. As while I didn't have any watches, I did have a mirror. But there was no way I was going to give them that, so I decided to tell a little white lie. I then told myself it didn't matter as I was just going to spend the night and leave first thing in the morning. When we arrived at my room, I started to hear the sounds of numerous people chatting. I was shocked as I thought I was the only one there, so when the receptionist left, I decided to go check it out. I followed the noise to a lounge area, and what I saw left me speechless. About 100 people were spread out in the massive area, talking and chatting with themselves. It's really hard to describe, but they were all so diverse and differently dressed. At first, I thought there was some sort of costume party going on, as some of the men and women were sporting old Victorian-era suits and dresses from the 1800s. To the far left of the room, another group of people were wearing clothing that was from the early 2000s. But the more I took in the scene, I realized the people's clothing wasn't what shocked me. What shocked me more was that there were no cars in the parking lot, yet over 100 people were in the motel. I knew that they all couldn't have walked here, and eventually my brain couldn't take it anymore as I struggled to make sense of what was going on. But no matter how much I tried, I couldn't. I then slowly made my way to my room as I told myself that I just needed to go to bed and get the night over with so that I could leave as soon as it was morning. So I went to my room, locked the door, and went to bed. When I woke up the next morning, I realized that
Smart to lock the door. Always lock a door whenever you're in a motel or even a hotel. Always lock the door. You never know who's going to be trying to come in the night. You never know what's going to happen. You don't know what creeps are living in there with you, or if there even are there, or if there are any, or if there are any.
I had slept in. That was odd to me because I was usually an early bird and I hardly ever slept in. Brushing off the thought, I got up and did my morning activities before getting ready to leave. But when I was done, I didn't leave. It's hard to put into words, but it's as if my body didn't want to leave. So instead of going to the reception and checking out, I found myself making my way to the motel's lounge. They had a small bar, so I ordered a drink before sitting in one of the chairs. I drank for a little while before two arguing men started to walk up to me. Unlike some of the people there, they were dressed in modern clothing. When they finally reached me, the first man said, "Hey, you're new here, right?" So I replied with, "Yes, I am. Any problem?" The man then said, "Good, good. Now will you tell this idiot here that it's the New York Jets that won the Super Bowl this year?" His other friend then retorted with, "No. You tell this madman that it's the Los Angeles Rams that won this year. Please tell him that I'm right and that it was a massive win against the Redskins." They started to argue again before I said, "Look, guys, I'm not really that into sports, but I heard that it was the Indianapolis Colts that won this year." When I was done speaking, they both had a shocked look on their faces before they busted out laughing. When they were done, the second man then said, "Hear that, Frank? He's saying that the Colts won. He's even crazier than us." And with that, they walked away laughing. Now, I wasn't really into sports, so I thought I might have been wrong. But as the day passed, I kept on having more and more strange conversations with the people at that motel. As later in the day, two people came in to sit at my table. They started talking about politics, but all they could do was argue as one of them said, "President Nixon's doing a shit job." The other person then looked shocked as he said, "Who?" "You mean President Roosevelt." I started getting tensed again, and I started to rack my brain at the confusion. I knew that the current president of the United States was George Bush, but I wasn't sure as I couldn't really remember. All my memories were now foggy, and the more I fought to remember, the harder it became to remember anything. As I sat there in deep thought, a pretty girl walked up to my table and offered me a drink. She then looked at me and said, "You look worried. What's wrong?" And I replied with, "I don't know. I'm trying to remember something that I wanted to do this morning, but I keep forgetting." The girl
Doesn't that all, like, correct me if I'm wrong, viewers, but doesn't that also happen when you get intoxicated? I don't know, I'm only 18, sorry, so I don't know. I've never drank in my life, so, isn't that that's what I've been told. Is that it gets harder and harder to remember when you're intoxicated, to the point where it's better just to forget it than to actually try to remember.
Then looked at me with a smile and said, "Don't worry about that. If you forgot, it probably wasn't important. Now, let's drink a couple of drinks and live in the moment." So I stopped trying to remember what it was, and I agreed. We talked all through the night without a care in the world, and my mind felt free. We eventually made our way to my room, and as she walked in, the first thing she noticed was the pink mirror on my bed. She then picked it up and said, "Whoa, you know they don't allow these in here." I responded with, "Yeah, I know, but I can't remember how or why I brought it in." The girl then looked at herself in the mirror while saying, "Well, it's good that you did. It's been a while since I've seen my face in the mirror. It's such a weird rule, isn't it?" I started to say, "Yeah, I know," before I stopped speechless. I let out a gut-wrenching scream as the girl in my room turned to look at me in shock. She then started to ask me, "What happened? Why did you scream?" But when I tried to speak, I started to stutter. I was so scared that I couldn't find the words to speak or say what I had just seen. And while I couldn't say it then, looking back at it now, what horrified me to the bone was what I saw when the girl picked up the mirror. I was standing behind her, so I managed to get a glimpse of her reflection, and I knew without a doubt that when she looked into that mirror, the reflection that looked back was not the woman standing in my room. The person I saw in that mirror was much more different. She was a haggard old woman with little to no hair. Her eyes were completely white, and her skin hung off her frail skeleton. The woman's reflection truly looked like someone who was over 1,000 years old, and I knew she wasn't human because humans don't live that long.
Okay, my Raid Shadow Legends legend.
As the fear filled every
No correlation at all. Now, let me ask you, viewers, what would you do if you were this guy? How would you prove this?
inch of my body, I felt my thoughts and memories begin to come back.
Sorry, I know I'm pausing a lot. I'm gonna wait until the end of this clip, into the next story, to then comment on the rest of it. So stay tuned to the end of each and every single clip, so that way I don't have to keep pausing it.
Back, and the first word that ran through my mind was, "Leave." So with no hesitation, I picked up the mirror she had dropped, and I bolted. As I ran down the hallway, the motel's staff started chasing after me while screaming the words, "No mirrors! No mirrors!" The hallway's lights began to dim, and I couldn't see the door I was running to anymore. As I looked back at the motel's staff, I screamed as the people that were once human now looked like morbid creatures. It's really hard to describe, but they were all 6 feet tall creatures with pale white skin. They had slits for eyes, and they bore no mouths. But even then, I could still hear them screaming the words, "No mirrors! No mirrors!" I couldn't see where I was running to now, as the hallway was completely dark, but I kept running. I eventually saw a door, and as I dashed toward it, within seconds, I was finally outside. And even though I couldn't see or hear them anymore, I kept running. I ran all the way to the nearest police station, screaming at the top of my lungs. When I arrived, I wasn't making sense to the cops, so they told me to calm down. It was hard, but I eventually did. They then gave me a report to fill, and I filled it out by writing everything that happened. I was then told to tell them the exact date the incident happened so they could write it down. So I told them, saying, "It happened today, on the 13th of October, 2007. Chuckles filled the room as the cop took my statement, said, 2007? Have you been drinking, sir? It's 2012. At first, I thought they were playing some kind of sick prank, so I started shouting, "Stop messing with me. I remember the date. It happened today, on 13th October, 2007. Silence filled the room as everyone was tense now. The officer then said, "Well, today is 13th of October, but the year is 2012. Frustrated now, I grabbed him by the shirt and and I told him to stop messing with me. The officer then said, "Sir, I know you're under a lot of stress and a bit delusional, but you're assaulting an officer, so please take your hand off my shirt." But I didn't. I thought the cops at the station were still trying to pull a sick trick on me. A trick that wasn't funny, and with all the fear, confusion, and rage I felt, I didn't think about what I did next as I punched the cop in the face. Within minutes, I was in cuffs and I was charged with assaulting an officer. I was taken to court where I stood by my case, but everyone just looked at me like I was a crazy person. The court deemed me mentally insane as my lawyer pleaded insanity. I was then taken to a mental institution where I was locked up and told to undergo rehabilitation. It's been 10 years now since I've been put in this place. Numerous psychologists have come to fix me, but I know what happened, and I stand by it. Last month, I asked for a pen and a book so that I could write down my experience and share it with the world. So, to whoever is seeing this, I don't care if you believe me or not. Society has deemed me a madman and thrown me into an asylum without hearing what I have to say. None of you were there, so you have no right to judge me. I know what happened in that motel is true. I don't know how they did it, but they took away 5 years of my life in one night. The funny thing is, as you people ignore me and lock me up in a cage, they are still out there, waiting for unlucky travelers. And any one of you people hearing my story could be next.
How would you react to this guy's story? I mean, that's a toughie. That's tough, man. I don't know how I would react to that if I heard that guy's story in a court. I've been to court before. Um, how would you react to that? And would you believe this guy's story? Without any definitive proof at all. Also, I know motion is somewhat blurry. I don't have a good quality camera. I'm sorry. I'll post a video soon about equipment that I have, the tools I'm using, stuff like that. But without further ado, sorry, I'm still waking up, guys.
Her name was Claire Smith. She had the prettiest blue eyes in addition to a very nice smile. We had matched the night before on Tinder, and after talking for a while, we decided to go on a date. It was a great restaurant, and I arrived early. I waited for about 30 minutes before she finally got there, and as she walked up to me, I smiled because she looked exactly like her pictures. I had always been wary about first dates, as I had been a victim of catfishing numerous times in the past, so I was usually relieved when my date looked like the person they were claiming to be in real life. When she finally arrived at our table, we exchanged pleasantries before we ordered what to eat. We spoke extensively as the date went on, and as she told me about her hobbies, her likes and dislikes, and her plans for the future. I really enjoyed the date and her company, but after a while, I realized that there was something off about her. She had a very strange aura, as I could tell by her facial expressions that she wasn't really comfortable. It looked like she was worried about something. After a while, I decided to ignore it, because apart from those little strange details, she seemed like a really nice person. The date eventually came to an end, and as I made preparations to leave, Claire looked at me and said, "Hey, this was really great. I really enjoyed myself, and I actually don't want it to end. I hope this isn't too forward, but I would love if we continued this date at my apartment." Now, this was a bit strange to me, as Most people normally waited till after the second date or third date before inviting someone over. But even then, I still wanted to accept the invitation as I really enjoyed the date too. So I agreed and we made our way to her apartment. When we arrived, she offered me a seat before she asked the question, "Do you drink?" So I replied with, "Yes, I do." I then saw her smile as she said, "That's great. Wait here while I go whip up something really nice for us to drink." As she left for the kitchen, I found myself taking in my surroundings. She had a really nice apartment and nothing seemed out of place. I waited in the living room for a while as she took her time in the kitchen. I could hear her making the drinks from where I was sitting, and after a while, she came out with a homemade cocktail and 2 glasses. She poured out 2 drinks before handing me one. And as I took the drink from her, Claire looked at me with a smile and said, "Now before you try the drink, I'd like if you could, truthfully, tell me what you really think about it." I found her statement a bit odd as she was now looking at me with so much excitement. I was a bit confused, but I didn't want to seem rude as I knew she put a lot of effort into making it. So I smiled and took a sip of the cocktail. It tasted amazing as I found myself drinking the whole thing. When I was done, I looked at her and said, "Wow, that was delicious. Did you actually make this cocktail by yourself?" Claire then smiled and said, "Yes, I did. I'm in my final college year, but I bartend on the side. So I always like creating delicious cocktails in my free time and getting people's thoughts on them." As she said that, I finally realized why she was so enthusiastic about me tasting the cocktail. After that, I had a couple more glasses as we continued talking into the night. After a while, Claire looked at me and said, "I'm really glad this is going well. I don't know if you noticed, but I'm not really good at this online dating stuff. I've been told I put off a really weird aura because I get really anxious and nervous on every first date. Most of the time, I don't know what to do, so I'm really glad I didn't scare you off." I remember letting out a small chuckle as I replied with, "I won't lie, I actually noticed that, but I like you too much to care." Claire then smiled as she reached out and gave me a kiss. After that, Claire got up to get more of her homemade cocktail in the kitchen, but I couldn't take it anymore. I knew I had to do it, as it was now or never. So I reached for one of the glass bottles that were on the table, and I broke off its base.
Found the gaming
Around to see what happened, and I started to apologize as I explained it was an accident. But as she bent down to pick up the broken glass shards, I used the head of the now broken bottle to stab her in the gut. She started to scream, so I immediately forced my hands over her mouth to stop her scream. And as she bled out, I calmly whispered in her ear, "When I was a boy, Claire, my father used to take me hunting. We mostly hunted the game in the forest, animals like deers and rabbits. And even though I thoroughly enjoyed it, I've always wanted more. So, when I was 14, I decided to hunt something better. I waited for a particular woman who used to hike in our forest every morning, and during her hike that morning, I shot and killed her." Claire started struggling and screaming now, but I held her down as I continued with, "That was the beginning of something really beautiful in my life, Claire, and I wanted more of it, so I kept hunting down women. I moved to the city to get my hands on more game, and after a while, I realized something amazing. In this modern world, hunting animals like you has never been easier, because dating platforms like Tinder do all the work, as they bring my prey right to me." I then removed my hands from her mouth as I threw her body to the floor. She had lost a lot of blood now, so her screams weren't as loud anymore. I then looked at her and said, "I consider myself a modern hunter, Claire, and you should be grateful because you had the pleasure of seeing me. Women like you were so desperate for love, and I know you'd do anything to get it. That alone makes people like you my perfect target. I mean, it only took a pretty face like mine to get you to invite a stranger into your home." I then watched as she tried to crawl towards the door before continuing with, "But you know the best thing about hunting, Claire? It's the look of despair in your victim's eyes as they try to get away from you. That, my dear Claire, is the thrill of hunting, looking on as your game puts up a futile struggle before you take that hope away by slowly putting them out of their misery. And with that, I repeatedly stabbed her with a broken bottle. She struggled, but it didn't take long before she was dead. When I was done having my fun, I calmly went outside to get the tools from my car. I then went back into Claire's apartment and I got to work. I put on my gloves and I cleaned up the place with bleach. I carried her bloody corpse and I put it in the bathtub that I had already filled with high-grade acid. The apartment now looked cleaner than ever, and the carcass was safely locked away in the bathtub. It'd take a couple of days before her remains are found, and I'd be long gone by then. So with a smile on my face, I made my way out of the apartment, and I congratulated myself on another successful hunt. That night, after dinner, I found myself using the Tinder app again. It didn't take long before I had quickly matched with another woman. She was called Abigail Dawson. She had beautiful brown eyes and amazing black hair. She lived in Los Angeles, and as we started texting, I began to smile as I said to myself, "Let the hunt begin."
Forgive me, I didn't realize I was muted. My bad. I don't like his face. His face is creepy. I. Mm-mm. Also, that's not the thrill of a hunt. Nowhere near. That's the thrill of killing people. I don't know from personal experience. Just saying that now. I don't know. That would be the thrill of killing people, not of a hunt. A hunt is not that. That is a technical form of hunting, but I don't know. Like, I'm not trying to stand up for this guy at all. This guy's a straight up creep and a weirdo. If his face is just creepy, what does the next video have for me, I wonder?
It all started when I woke up to the sound of someone hammering on my apartment door. That was the first fright I got that night. Heart pounding my chest as I grabbed the bat I kept under my bed and headed towards the door. First thing I do is look through the peephole to make sure it's not anyone sketchy, but I'm greeted by the sight of one of my neighbors. She looks terrified. She's covered in blood, and I can see just through the peephole that her face is a mess. I open up the door, she runs inside and immediately says, "You gotta get me out of here. My boyfriend's trying to kill me." I start to ask her what happened, and she says something like, "There's no time. Just please get me out of here. I swear to God, he'll kill you too for just helping me." That was what sent me into a straight-up panic, because if a guy was willing to beat his girlfriend up that badly, Lord knows that he'd be willing to put me in the ground. I just grabbed my car keys, ran downstairs with the girl following close behind, jumped into my car, then took off into the night. I remember asking her if she had anywhere I could take her, like a friend's or a relative's or something. She said no, and the best thing for us to do would be to drive to a motel so she could call the cops from there. So that's exactly what I did. I drove us to a motel and booked us a room. The clerk was obviously just as concerned as I was, but all it took was to explain that her boyfriend had tried to off her, and they were like, "Jeez, make sure you guys call the cops at least." The girl, whose name I didn't know at that point, I just knew she was a neighbor, said that she'd go up to the room and call them, then asked me to get her some ice from the ice machine so she could deal with the swelling on her face. When I got to the room, she said the cops would be there ASAP, took the ice, put it on her face, then just burst into tears. I tried my best to reassure her, telling her she was safe and stuff. Then, when she finally calmed down, I asked her what actually happened back at her apartment. She told me her boyfriend was abusive, and that she'd been planning on leaving for a while, but that night was the night she'd finally got the courage together to announce it to him. She said he walked into their bedroom to find her packing a bag, and not long after that, everything went to chaos. She started helping herself to the little bottle of liquor from the minibar, but not after promising she'd pay me back for them once everything had blown over. I had no reason to disbelieve her at the time. I mean, I felt like we had a kind of bond established already, but I abstained because I thought I'd be driving back to the apartment pretty soon. I asked her if she was good to wait on her own while the cops drove out to her, but she asked me if I'd stay to keep her safe. She then made the point that if her boyfriend found the blood on my apartment door, she assured me that she'd left some on there while hammering on it, that he'd know she'd been there and he'd try to attack me, or worse. I'll be honest, I thought it was a pretty good point at the time. I hadn't seen the blood myself, but she was so covered in it that I believed her when she said that there was some on my door. Anyway, about an hour goes by and the cops still haven't showed up, and the motel rooms were arranged in a horseshoe shape, so we'd have seen them rolling into the parking lot if they had. I asked her to call them back to see what was going on, because obviously it was a really urgent situation, and I know that there was basically no way for the boyfriend in finding us, but I was still really paranoid that he would somehow. That's when the inconsistency started, because she gave me some lame duck of a reply like, "I'm sure they'll be here soon." If that was me, I'd have called 911 again if they hadn't shown up within like 10 minutes. So what was she so calm about that she was just cool with waiting for them for like an hour at that point? I put it down to booze, and at that point I was okay with waiting too. It wasn't like I had anywhere to be. I sure couldn't just go back to my apartment with that psycho supposedly just a few doors down. But that's also about the same time that I started checking out the amount of blood on her nightshirt. She had like an oversized t-shirt and girl boxers on, and like I said earlier, they were drenched with blood, but also with some blood splattered too, like little spots here and there. She had this cut over her eye, and she had a nasty busted lip, but it looked like way too much blood for just those small wounds. So I asked her if she had any other kind of injuries, like an abdominal wound of some kind that might account for all the blood on her. She said no, and that it was all from the busted lip in her eye. And immediately I start smelling nonsense. I asked her again what exactly had happened back at the apartment, and she started getting weirdly defensive about what she told me. I was starting to think it wasn't quite the abusive spouse kind of story that she told me the first time around, but I had no inkling of what was really going on. That being said, I was getting tired of waiting for the cops to show, so I decided to call them back myself. All I had on me was my wallet, my phone, and my car keys, the only three things I'd had time to stuff into the pockets of my shorts before fleeing the apartment. But when I take my phone out to call the cops, she says something along the lines of, "What are you doing?"
I was having relationship issues with my old bank. It was just take. So I moved to SoFi Checking and Savings.
Get 2.00% interest and earn up to $300 when you set up direct deposit. SoFi, get your money right.
I state the obvious. I'm about to call the cops back, and she's like, "Don't." I don't know if it was the way she was looking at me, the way she spoke, or the way she sort of tensed up when I told her that I was about to do that, but the mood in the room just shifted completely. I asked her why not, and just went right back to dialing 911. But by the time the operator spoke down the line, I looked up and saw she had a knife in her hand. She just said, "Hang up. Now."
911, what's your emergency?
So I did. I'd never had a knife pulled on me at that point, and I can't overstate how terrifying it was. It wasn't even just the knife either. It was the overwhelming creepy sensation of knowing that all wasn't what it seemed. I wasn't hiding from the threat. I was with the threat. I'll be honest here. I basically begged her not to hurt me, and to my relief, she said she wouldn't as long as I drove her to the Canadian border. Given this was in Detroit, the border isn't all that far, but I didn't want to catch charges for aiding and abetting or whatever, so I knew I had to think of something to stop that from happening. It's not like I knew I couldn't tell the cops that I'd been threatened or whatever, but I also knew that the longer I spent in this girl's company, the more chances I'd have of being stabbed. So, I tell the girl that I'd drive her to the border, but that I needed to get something to eat first. I play it like I wanted to stop somewhere on the way, knowing she'd reason me down to getting something delivered from a 24-hour joint. She also stated that she'd be the one going down to pick the food up, as she didn't want me having the chance to sound the alarm. That's where she messed up, because she didn't seem to realize, to my infinite relief, that I could order from DoorDash and put something in the notes about needing the cops called to the motel. My whole plan hinged on there being a driver around that late at night, but thank God there was, and I was even able to show her the order without bringing up the notes section that mentioned needing 911 called to the motel. And the cops played it perfectly too. They showed up without any lights and sirens on, didn't park in the lot, walked up to the motel room without being spotted from the window, and then just knocked on the door like they were a delivery driver. She walks over, opens up the door, then boom, they had a gun and a taser drawn on her before she even knew what was happening. She had the knife tucked into the back of her girl boxers, but the cops were wise to her drawing on them, and she hit the floor hard after they hit her with the taser. Turned out they'd been looking for her because, get this, she was the abusive partner who'd stabbed her boyfriend almost to death before finding some poor schmuck, i.e. me, to drive her to the border. Dude almost bled to death in their apartment but managed to crawl to another neighbor's place to get help. You should have seen the amount of blood in the hallway when I got back to my apartment building, and the whole place was crawling with cops and forensic gear. I thought I might be able to drive over to a friend's place to stay the night, contaminating a crime scene or whatever, but they had this section of the corridor closed off so I could actually get into where I lived. The cops came to my apartment in the morning to take my statement down and to fill me in on what they thought had happened. That's how I found out exactly what the deal was. It was 100% the craziest, most frightening thing that's ever happened to me, ever in my life, and just the fact that I was part of it seems completely surreal to me. But the thing that sticks with me is how easily I swallowed her nonsense story at first, how I thought it was helping someone I knew, someone I could trust, when in reality, one wrong move, and I might not actually be around to tell you this.
Alright. Oh, this part looks like an ad. It's not. Some bits of information are coming back to me. Okay. I really don't like this one. This one's so creepy. Alright, where do I even get started? Okay. If that was me, I would simply look through the door hole, or the eye hole on the door, and I would instantly notice the wounds on her face. And if she has blood away from those wounds, I know she's the target or the attacker. I'm not gonna let them sit there and play victim, though. And I won't play with their game. Yes, it's smarter to play along. However, it's also smarter to keep the door locked and not help them. Now, you can also let them in, and when they don't expect you to run. I.e., before you let them know that you know they're the attacker. That person had ample time to run away. When the lady got into their car, they could have bolted the other way after locking the doors and locking them inside the car, thus giving them more time to then bolt. Not only that, when you are at the room service, or not the room service, the receptionist at for the motels or anything like that. If somebody's covered in blood, they're not gonna sit there idly and not care. They're gonna question it and or deny services. Either way, though, someone's being questioned, and they are bound to slip up. That's the problem with lies. Is that eventually you slip up.
The 2020 pandemic that shook the world affected everyone in different ways. Some met financial insecurity. Others faced the social struggles brought by isolation during stringent lockdown regulations. Most faced extreme health complication, either with ourselves or with our loved ones. My name is Jason. I was 27 when the pandemic hit. I lived alone in a small apartment and struggled emotionally when my municipality forced me to remain inside for weeks. I was forced to work remotely, stuck behind a computer monitor all day. I was unable to visit my family, and to make matters worse, I was unable to release stress the only way I knew how, working out. At last, after months of feeling caged up, my city began to lift COVID-related regulations. The softening of rules included the reopening of gyms. As long as stations were sanitized constantly, masks were worn, and social distancing was respected, we were allowed to return to the gym, finally. That Monday morning, I was the first in line outside of my local gym, eager to get back to work and regain my great physical condition. Upon entering, I felt right at home, despite changes that were being implemented. I hopped on a treadmill and began jogging. My stress began melting off. The next few weeks were paradise. I was working from home, allowing me more time for myself. I instantly used this time up at the gym. There, I felt rejuvenated. Every visit left me feeling stronger, both physically and mentally. Before long, I was going in 2 times a day, once in the morning and once late at night. It was late at night when things began to get strange. My gym was open 24 hours a day. During my morning workouts, the gym was always booming with people. Like me, most of us were hungry for workouts after being deprived for months. Every machine and weight station was taken, often lines for each. The gym was full of life, and I loved it.
Recently, I was hacked by an attacker who took several of my accounts and was even emailing me my own personal information. He was threatening to abuse this information and sell it online. Scary, right? The hacker's goal was actually just to steal my Fortnite cosmetics. Thankfully, he wasn't able to get them. Since then, I've learned how to protect myself online, and I want you to all be safe as well. That's why I'm showing you.
At night, the gym was the polar opposite. It was always deserted, and I often found myself alone in the entire gym with only the receptionist, a guy named Bill, watching me drowsily from his desk. I had every machine, weight station, and facility to myself. During one late workout session, I stared mindlessly at the television while running on the treadmill. I blasted music through my headphones. Beside the television, a large mirror covered the entire northern wall, where most meatheads fixed and admired their muscles during the day. Sweat dripped off my forehead. That was when something caught the corner of my peripheral vision. Through the reflection, I saw a shadow sweep behind me, causing my heart rate to accelerate even more. I turned to look back, but the gym remained empty. Just then, the soft click of a door closing caused me to jerk my head back. Had someone entered the locker rooms, or had I imagined that? I rushed to the front desk. "Hey, Bill," I asked, trying to sound natural. "You haven't seen anyone else in the gym tonight, have you?" He shrugged at me. "Not since a few hours before you arrived." He returned his attention to his phone. Surely I had imagined it. But the next night, something similar happened again. It was 2 in the morning. The gym was deserted, except for Bill and me. I had finished a brutal cardio session and moved on to the dumbbell station. I placed my phone on a nearby bench next to my towel, bottle of water, and a half-eaten protein bar. I began my workout. 1, 2, 3, 4. I whispered sharply into the silence of the gym. Exhaustion took over as I approached the end of my set.
Sorry, I was getting a little chilly, so I went ahead and put on swapped my shorts for some sweats. A little cold.
That's when the gym lights began to flicker. I placed the weights down and looked up at the light bulbs. Bill? I asked. The receptionist stared back at me from a distance, shrugging. Then, everything went dark. I stood for a moment, wondering what was going on. I realized I could use my phone as a flashlight, and I began to walk carefully towards the bench. As I did, I heard footsteps around me, brisk and light. I stopped, listening intently into the darkness. Accompanying the scattered footsteps was raspy breathing. Okay, Bill, what the hell is going on? But before I could finish the sentence, a great force pushed me from behind.
Nope. No. That's my biggest fucking fear. Is if somebody's stalking me in the dark. I'm good. No thanks. I'm good. I'll keep that out. Nope. Officially scared at this point. So, the challenge of this video was to see how long I could go without getting scared. We just figured that out. Oh, God. And no, being creeped out does not count as being scared. Alright. Well, SSG animation, thank you. I really appreciated this. I'm so glad that you actually decided to let me use your video for my video. I'm really thankful. Thank you. Truly. Again, if y'all don't know him, go check him out. I have his username right up, up in the text on screen, and there's his channel right there. Again, go check him out. They're really good. Some things y'all need to tweak on a little though. Hopefully y'all see that in this video. Again, go check out SSG animation, and that's gonna do it for this video. Stay tuned for another video coming up shortly. Peace.